Snugged tight to the base of Mount Tom, easternmost spine of the Green Mountains, its meadows bounded by the Ottauquechee River and Barnard Brook, sits Billings Farm, which for 150 years has been integrated into the near landscape of the old shire town of Woodstock, Vermont. One of Vermont's legacy farms, Billings Farm celebrates its sesquicentennial this year, and since 1983 has been a component of Billings Farm Museum. As we inspire and engage our guests across the seasons through shared stories of Vermont's rural culture and our continued practice of responsible agriculture, we are mindful that we are heirs to the ethos of stewardship, sustainability, and conservation held and embodied in the lives and the work of the former owners of the farm property. They included George Perkins Marsh, a scholar, linguist, diplomat, and environmentalist. Referenced by David Lowenthal as the prophet of conservation, Marsh was a seminal figure in America's early conservation movement. Marsh grew to adulthood in the federal brick home fronting the farm property, seen in the center of this 1860s photo. Marsh was succeeded in property ownership by another remarkable individual, Frederick Billings, who in his youth had moved to Woodstock. In 1848, Billings traveled to California, where for the next 2 decades he would make a fortune as an attorney and real estate investor. Billings commissioned Carleton Watkins to photographically describe the grandeur of Yosemite, which had captured Billings' heart. Having witnessed the splendor of the vast, virgin, timbered landscapes of the West, Billings was dismayed at finding the hills of his beloved Green Mountains denuded of vegetation from years of overgrazing by sheep and wanton timber harvesting for lumber and potash production. But he loved Woodstock, purchased the old Marsh place on a nearby barren hillside, and over the next several decades greatly enlarged and improved the property. Inspired by the ideas of George Perkins Marsh, as espoused in his 1864 Man and Nature, Billings judiciously selected and arranged for the planting of tens of thousands of trees, from European larch, Norway spruce, and more, reforesting his Mount Tom property, all the while purposefully setting a course that other Vermonters might follow. Much of this work was under the direction of a Scot, George Aitken, who in 1884 became the 4th manager of the farm. A powerful leader who put his hand to the plow and over the next quarter century would realize Frederick Billings' vision of transforming and shaping the landscape. So enthralled with Aitken was Billings that, as an enticement to have him outlive the shorter tenure of his previous farm managers, Billings constructed a handsome and commodious farm manager's house, a centerpiece of today's museum experience. From the manager's office, Aitken managed a substantial workforce of local men who planted, sugared, built miles of carriage roads, and over the years, with teams of oxen, deepened and expanded a mountaintop spring-fed pogue hole to become an important source of water for the estate below. Still in operation today, a water motor, driven by the force of water, gravity-fed through a nearly mile-long 4-inch pipe from the pogue, powers a large Davis swing churn in the farm's creamery. The farm's gravity-fed irrigation system also connects to this early sustainable source. A studious farmer and dairyman, versed in the latest progressive agricultural literature, Aitken devoted much of his energy to improving and growing the farm's herd of Jerseys, first introduced directly from the Isle of Jersey by Frederick Billings in 1871. It was Billings' intention that through sustainable and progressive practice, the farm would serve as a beacon to fellow Vermonters on how the landscape of the Green Mountain State could successfully be worked. Toward that end, farm manager Aitken participated in summer industrial school programs for teachers, instructing them in the finer points of the Jersey breed. The rhythms of harrowing, haying, and binding, George Aitken using the latest technology, a McCormick bindlow shine to increase efficiency of farm operations, was punctuated by opportunities to showcase the quality of the continually improving Jersey herd. In 1893, at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, for example, Aitken returned to Woodstock with a number of champions, including Princess Honoria, who was crowned the top 3-year-old cow in America. While in the 20th century, Vermont had become renowned for her Jerseys and alliteratively Morgans, Maple, and Men, it was several generations of Billings family women who, after the passing of Frederick Billings and later of George Aitken, skillfully led and expanded the farm operation. During the First World War, the farm's labor force was augmented by local young women, the Women's Land Army, or farmerettes, who, our records show, were compensated the same as their male counterparts, one of the farm's significant stories shared with today's museum goers. While the Billings herd was sold off during the Great Depression, it was rejuvenated with bloodline stock connecting with and providing a continuum to the early Billings champion herd. In 1948, the barns were upgraded, and in the years that followed, the Jersey milk was bottled on site and delivered locally. In the 1950s, ownership of the farm and estate transferred to Frederick Billings' granddaughter, Mary French Rockefeller, wife of Lawrence Rockefeller, an ardent conservationist. In 1983, Mary and Lawrence established Billings Farm and Museum, an interactive, multifaceted learning laboratory, and 15 years later, they donated the Mount Tom estate to become Vermont's only national park. Today, Billings Farm and Museum is the nation's only museum that combines the experience of a galleried and outdoor history museum with a fully functioning farm through which 60,000 visitors each year are introduced to what are becoming more and more alien concepts in today's world. Today's herd of Jerseys, more than 100 strong, and with 45 to 50 milkers, continues Billings and Aiken's legacy as one of the finest Jersey herds in the country, producing a diversified product array, important in today's economy, from fluid milk to the Agrimark Cooperative, milk to a local dairy producer, and in cooperation with a local cheesemaker, our own line of artisanal cheeses. Over the decades, the built environment of the farm has evolved from the removal of a pair of silos and 50 years later, restoring another pair as an iconic interpretive element, and to constructing a new freestall heifer barn, interpretive counterpoint to the farm's tie-stall milking barn, and more. But across the last half century and a half, the Billings farmland has evinced a reassuring constancy. The Great Meadow, once Vermont's largest cornfield and producer of oats, now today 3 cuttings of hay for our Jerseys and draft horses. Processes and technologies have evolved from bull rakes and ox-pulled wagon to Fordsons and John Deere, Case, Kubota, and New Holland. But the contours of the land, its productivity, the openness and unspoiled vistas, thanks to four-sided scenic easements, remain largely unchanged, available for farm and museum use across the seasons. It serves as a canvas for demonstration of former technologies, and the Great Meadow and Blake Hill beyond, once the backdrop for the kitchen garden tended by the Aiken daughters, today stand watch over the farm and museum's heirloom garden, similarly located. The garden shares its produce with a local food pantry and integrates with the interpretive foodways program in the farm manager's house through both demonstration and participation. Foodways programs keyed to healthy eating and sourcing locally unfold within the museum's learning kitchen. Education gardens are active laboratories for linkages to victory gardens, children's nutrition, and pollinators. Our nearby garden shed hosts Billings backyard programs for adults, teaching traditional farming and homesteading skills for the modern day, from composting to beekeeping and the importance of pollinators, and more. The site's 10,000 square foot sunflower house, newly designed each year, is a haven for area pollinators, and a large community garden on our property serves the local populace in concert with Sustainable Woodstock, an environmentally focused nonprofit. During the summer, Ballet Vermont performs farm-focused and environmentally themed ballet at the head of our meadow. Aligned with our mission of responsible agriculture, we have in recent years shifted our remaining fields of corn to no-hay till production, which, when combined with exacting amounts of bee pulp and grain determined by our nutritionist, provide an optimum diet for our high-fat, high-protein milk and the cheese produced from it. This diet also helps control methane emissions from our jerseys, the informational context woven into an extensive interpretive program shared with our guests. Sustainable environmental practice extends across our farm and museum campus in an active compost and recycling program, and within the museum, for guests and staff alike, we've initiated a pledge to use reusable water bottles rather than single-use plastic bottles, no longer available on site. All of these initiatives are resident in and an outgrowth of our strategic framework. 2 primary pillars include stewardship and sustainability and farming and foodways, both intentionally linking to the legacy of environmental care and sensibility embedded within the DNA of the farm and to the future, ours and our guests. We infuse these themes in children's story activity, engaging our youngest visitors with a sensitivity to important issues. And we instill in our visitors, young and old, a better understanding of where their food comes from. This is amplified in the week-long series of junior farmer camps we host each summer, linking processes past and present. Educating and instilling hope for the next generation extends to junior invitational cattle shows we host during Dairy Month, and to our practice of welcoming college agricultural apprentices in the summer months, with two joining us this summer. As we continue to steward our farm property, adding our hands and voices to the hundreds of those who have visioned, toiled, and shaped this special place, we take inspiration from being part of the continuum of agricultural practice at Billings Farm as we teach and train our young stock and engage our visitors with the understanding of how we can all participate in and enjoy a more sustainable future.